Okay, and good evening. It's time to call to order the Lunenburg Public Schools School Committee meeting this evening, but we are going to start with Dr. Burnham.
Good evening, everyone. As a preliminary matter, this is Dr. Burnham, the Superintendent of Schools. I will do a roll call to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Chair, Mrs. Carol Archambault.
Yes.
Vice Chair, Mr. Brian Leighton.
Yes.
Secretary, Mrs. Laura Kelly.
Yes.
Ms. Sophie Shapiro will not be joining the meeting this evening. And I will introduce our newest member of the school committee appointed last evening, Mr. Anthony Scolambrini.
Hello, everybody.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Recording secretary, Ms. Susan Summers.
Yes.
And our business manager, Mr. Michael Cassidy.
Yes.
And we also have some of our principals joining us this evening. And I'll turn it back to you, Mrs. Archambault.
All righty. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and will be broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel and streaming on Facebook Live at a later time. And this meeting of the Lunenburg School Committee is being conducted remotely. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, public meetings may be conducted remotely. The order, which you can find posted on the town website on the COVID-19 Information Center page, accessed through the town manager's webpage, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Lunenburg School Committee is convening by telephone conference, video conference, via Zoom app, Facebook Live, etc., as posted on the town's website, identifying on how the public may join. For Zoom meetings, please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees, actually all attendees, are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and that you take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Before we turn to the first item on the agenda, let me cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to assure accurate meeting minutes. I, Carol Archambault, the chair, will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, any member is invited to provide comments, questions, and motions. Please hold until your name is called. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So our first item is the Pledge of Allegiance. And I had been leaving that off remote things, but I feel badly skipping over it. I don't think you can skip the Pledge of Allegiance. So we are going to stand and salute the flag, even though we're all in boxes. So I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First on the agenda is the chair's report. And I'm happy to report that at last evening's joint select board and school committee meeting, as Dr. Burnham said, Anthony Scolambrini, did I get it right? All right. was appointed to fill the school committee vacancy until the spring town election. We welcome him to the committee and we thank him very much for his willingness to serve the students of our community. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the family, staff, and students for navigating their way through the school year thus far. And I wish everyone happy holidays and a restful, healthy holiday break coming up. So with that, do we have a presentation tonight? I didn't.
Not
think
this
so.
evening.
All right, then public comment is next on the agenda. I want to remind the public that the first public comment section is for agenda items only. The second public comment section is open to any topic within the scope of authority of the school committee. Public comments about individual students are prohibited to protect the privacy of the student per state and federal law. Our public comment section runs for 10 minutes, 3 minutes per person. If need be, we can vote to extend it. So do we have any public comments this evening? Mason, we'd be happy to hear your comments. Please state your name and your address. Oh, we can't hear you.
Hello.
There you go.
Hi, my name is Mason Bowser, and I live at 512 West Townsend Road. I'm currently a junior and play varsity soccer at Lunenburg High School. Our school values extracurricular activities because they create well-rounded, happier students, and more than half the student body participates in athletics through Lunenburg. With this in mind, I believe that the school should hire an athletic trainer in order to keep all athletes safe and in good physical shape during their sports seasons. As of right now, we do not have a certified medical professional present at all sporting events for every sport. Football and ice hockey have an EMT present at every game, as that is required by the MIAA. However, sports like track, field hockey, basketball, lacrosse, and soccer has no one to ensure the safety of the students. Statistics representing student injuries by sport show that high school soccer has the most injuries out of any sport. Every sports team in Lunenburg struggles with injuries. This last soccer season, at least 3 athletes suffered major injuries. In addition to this, in a match against West Boylston, an athlete suffered a broken leg. This incident happened on the Lunenburg turf, and there was no immediate attention for the student athlete. These situations could have had lesser impact had a medical professional been present. And if athletic trainer had been present at either game, they could have received immediate medical attention. Athlete safety should be one of the top priorities, and as of right now, I do not believe it is. Both students and parents are addressing this need. The issue regarding the need for an athletic trainer has been the basis of 3 civics projects in the civic and community engagement class offered at LHS in the last 3 years. We have set up a survey and received about 50 responses from students at LHS. 93.4% of the responses agree that Lunenburg should prioritize staffing an AT to keep the athletes safe. The parents who answered our survey recognize the concern as well. The athletic trainer position is currently in the 5-year plan, but is not currently being prioritized and is not budgeted for the upcoming fiscal years. Our athletic director, Mr. Bono, agrees that it is an urgent need and should be attended to as soon as possible. If the school committee rearranges the budget, there may be room for this position. I believe that this should be a necessary action as parents and students have consistently shown concern for this topic and continue to this day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mason, very much for your comments. And you're very timely as we are just beginning our budget season. And it might be helpful to forward some of that data that you're talking about to one of the members of the school committee so we can take a look at that. Thank you very much for your comments. Are there any other public comments?
I don't see any.
I don't either, but we all know I'm not good at that.
Hello.
There we go. Hello.
Hi, this is Dave Rogers.
Hi, Mr. Rogers.
I have a question about the agenda this evening and the subject thereof.
Okay.
There's a first read policy 1202 regulations governing the use of school facilities.
Yes.
I had a reason to attend a Parks and Recreation meeting the other day about Marshall Park, and there was some discussion about some sort of a understanding with the school as it pertains to fields. When the fields are not in use by the schools, it was my understanding, just in the brief conversation that I overheard, that the Parks Department had talked with the school about, giving notice and hopefully coordinating the use of school fields. And it was my interpretation that this was not resolved, and I wondered what the status of that was with the school committee, because we need additional fields, and I think that this is something that needs to be looked at, and I just want to make sure that it is. The second thing is the second issue relative to the use of school facilities. I hope that there is not a part of this discussion that will deal with money, because my considered opinion is that we taxpayers in the town have paid for the school facilities. We've paid for the maintenance. We've paid for the electricity, et cetera, et cetera. So I would hope that there would not be any discussion relative to charging. And the reason I say this, I harken back to a time when the school committee talked about monies that they were going to charge the Girl Scouts for use of a room for a meeting. And I happened to be at that meeting, and I just I can't believe that we would charge for that kind of thing. So I'm concerned about any charges that may or may not be anticipated to be charged by the school committee. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Rogers. We will certainly answer all of that during our discussion about the policy. All of your concerns have been concerns of ours, and it will be covered in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more public comment, then we will continue on. We have no minutes this evening, I believe.
Correct.
And I didn't see any line item transfers.
Correct.
Well, that was quick. Now on to the superintendent's report.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Let me start with an update on COVID statistics that we've been sharing through my reports. The town positivity rate is currently 8%. The state positivity rate is currently 5.18%. We have had 6 positive cases so far this week. We have had 253 tests administered and a total of 106 students involved in the test and stay program. The second clinic, vaccination clinic, that our local Board of Health is hosting will be on December 21st at the middle high school. This is for the second of the 2 shots for the vaccination for our population that is 5 to 11 years old. There is a link on our district website for additional information regarding that clinic. In the district, currently the high school is 70% vaccinated. The middle school is 53% vaccinated. Turkey Hill Elementary is 28% vaccinated, and the primary school is 16% vaccinated, and that would be fully vaccinated. There are about 12.5 students that have had only their first vaccination shot. I would like to offer gratitude on behalf of all of the school secretaries, as you know, they annually run a gift card drive. And this year they received $8,000 in donations, and those donations will go to students and families in need. I would also like to update you that I have scheduled forums to meet with different groups to discuss the administration model for the middle high school. I have a parent forum scheduled tomorrow evening, another one next Monday, and I have a student forum scheduled tomorrow evening as well. This afternoon, I had a meeting with staff from both the middle and high school. And I thought the conversation really was excellent, very insightful. Too early to make a decision, but their comments were highly valued and helpful, very helpful. And that's all I have for you this evening. I would like to offer happy holiday wishes to all of our staff and students, as well as all the community members in Lunenburg.
Thank you, Dr. Burnham. As we do not have a student representative this evening, I believe we didn't have anyone come.
Correct.
Okay, then we will continue on to new business and the FY23 budget, identified needs, and the 5-year staffing plan.
So Mr. Cassidy and I will co-present. As you know, this is an exercise that we started doing 2 years ago. This is our third iteration of a 5-year plan for projected district needs. I do want to make clear for everyone that we look at this 5-year plan in a different way from other departments in town. Other departments in town might be looking to reach a certain staffing level, and there's a plan over multiple years to reach that staffing level. Whereas for us, needs are constantly changing. And this process for us, we identify the needs that we see or anticipate, and then we try to prioritize them. Just because we identify something in year 1 does not necessarily mean that it is going to be seen in the budget that we will also begin developing. So as we start this presentation, we always circle back to our mission statement and the vision. And is Mr. Cassidy able to check the next slide?
Can you see it?
Nope, I'm still on the first slide.
Okay, hold on. Can you see it now?
Yes, yes, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries. So the mission of the Lunenburg Public Schools is to provide all students with the skills, confidence, and passion for lifelong learning so that they may find their own paths to successful careers, active citizenship, and rewarding lives. And our vision for the Lunenburg Public Schools, we are committed to becoming a leader in education by focusing on our values of attending to the personal well-being of our students, providing high quality curricula and student-centered instruction for deeper learning at all levels, and promoting the development of attributes and skills necessary for continuous learning for all. And I will just revisit the strategy for continuous improvement. As we think about our staffing needs, as we anticipate the development of the FY23 budget, all of those things are designed to further the work of the district that has been outlined in the strategy for continuous improvement. Key areas being transforming teaching and learning, cultivating climate and culture, communication and operations, and equity, access, opportunity, and achievement for all. We typically give you some data regarding enrollment and class sizes. And this is a graphic that should look fairly familiar. As you can see, based on recent trends, our numbers are holding steady. As you know, COVID has impacted our student enrollment. Parents who may not have felt comfortable returning their students for a variety of reasons due to COVID. According to the state, if they were concerned around health issues, their only option really was to withdraw from the district and enroll in a recognized online school in the state. Other parents, again, with different concerns, some COVID related, some not. We always have parents that opt for homeschooling, and we do still have a small number of students that are on homeschool plans right now, again, COVID related. So we may see those students re-enroll. And our class sizes are holding pretty steady. The one increase we see at the Lunenburg Middle School. Otherwise, numbers have remained pretty consistent in terms of class size. So when we worked with our leadership team in reviewing last year's presented identified needs in a 5-year plan, this is what resulted. So this slide here is the current fiscal year, and these are positions that we funded this year. You will see that the bold text indicates that these positions are grant funded. They did not make it into our original FY22 budget. There are a few additional positions, such as the LPNs that we hired to assist our RNs in keeping pace with contact tracing with an increased number of positive cases. Much of what you see here was funded through the ESSER grants.
Dr. Burnham, could I
Yes, please do.
jump in? Yeah. So these are positions that you're going to see in future slides. So the bolded positions are grant funded. The Director of Teaching and Learning and the Coordinator for Community Schools, those positions were, well, the Director of Teaching and Learning was local and revolving account money, and then the Coordinator of Community Schools was strictly out of 2 revolving accounts. So, so even those were exceptions to being completely funded out of the local budget. The nurse substitute, there's a possibility that we're still waiting for official word and contract from the Department of Public Health. We think we may be getting money to fund the nurse substitute for this year and possibly next year. So there isn't any reference to that in the presentation tonight. We haven't seen the contract. We did get a verbal commitment, but until we get a written commitment in a contract, we won't make that adjustment. So the assistant principal and at the high school was an interim just because of the shift of Principal Santry covering both schools. So that that position is unclear for next year. And then the assistant principal at the Turkey Hill is a completely new position on the local budget. So the bolded positions you're going to see again as we move forward through this presentation.
All right, so as we met with the leadership team and having them advocate for what they felt they needed next year to support students academically, health-wise, and mental health-wise, and physical health-wise, you can see that there are a number of instructional positions. So our counselors, our teachers, and our paraprofessionals. In terms of leadership, and again, these are not administrator jobs, but they fill a leadership role in the district. That instructional math specialist position you see again, that was the one that we were unable to fill with a qualified candidate. But we said that we would carry that back this year. And pending what the decision is of the committee relative to transportation, there is a need for a person to be the transportation coordinator. We don't envision that as a full-time position though. And lastly, the services and support category. Those are our psychologists, our nurses, and the principals, as you know, have been struggling. They did an amazing job last year of keeping our schools open when we had very, very few folks interested in substituting in a school. And we're seeing that we have a similar challenge again this year. And they have asked to have a paraprofessional, one paraprofessional assigned to each building, that they would have at least that one guaranteed position to cover teacher absences.
So one bit of information I want to draw the committee's attention to is the identification of the nurse substitute at the Lunenburg Middle School. It's highlighted in red, it's bolded. So this is this right now as it stands, that position expires in the local budget next year. So we are recommending that it continues with we'll determine the funding source at the budget time. But that was a position that was funded by the local budget, and the funding is expired as it was presented last year. Once again, to reiterate some of the points that the superintendent made, LPNs and the paraprofessionals that are day-to-day subs in every building, you know, those are really COVID related. Obviously if the conditions change and you know, that staff isn't needed, certainly those positions won't be funded as we go move forward in time. And just to highlight this group of positions, and there's a lot of positions here, but there is a focus of these positions on advancement of student in an academic way, and health and safety um, uh, protocol. So it's important that we had identified these positions in the event that additional funding becomes available through DPH, DESE, federal government, that we basically have a plan on the shelf that we can pull out and apply some of these positions to assist students. We know that the local budget can't support all these positions, but they're identified needs by the leadership team, and well, once again, it's with some sort of anticipation of additional funding. These would be the positions that we would be looking for to fund. So I think so the takeaway of my comments is we know that the local budget isn't going to support all these, but it's number two, I think it's important to identify them in case other funding does become available.
And then you can see far fewer positions noted for year 2. Some additional instructional staff, as well as service and support staff positions. You can see the athletic trainer position is there as well, but no additional teacher or administrator leadership roles have been identified for year 2 at this time.
Once again, I'll just highlight that the targeted math position is highlighted in red. That is currently being funded under ESSER 2 funds. And for FY24, those funds will have expired. We're moving that position forward at this time as we measure that position and its role in the at the high school.
Again, in year 3 of the 5-year plan, some additional instructional staff, services and support staff, and you can see all of those in red, as Mr. Cassidy has indicated. Those are positions that we have currently that are funded through the ESSER grant, but by FY25, that grant money will have expired, and we will have to make a decision at that time how many of these positions we would look to maintain, if any, and funding sources for them. And there are a couple of positions identified as leadership functions in year 3 as well. Year 4, again, it's a little, far out at this point, year 4 and year 5. And as we know we're not going to see all of those positions that were identified in year 1. So every year when we revisit this plan, positions may continue to get moved out into years 3, 4, 5. But right now we're looking at the possibility of some teaching positions, an early childhood coordinator that may need to be revisited as well, pending federal legislation around universal pre-K. And the instructional data specialist that we have talked about, and the importance of shifting our practice around the use of data in the classroom setting. Anything to add, Mr. Cassidy?
Not for this year.
And then 5 years out, again, we would like to be able to expand world cultures into the middle school and down to Turkey Hill Elementary. It's not seen as an urgent matter, so it has been bumped out to year 5 of a 5-year plan. And again, this plan is going to look different next year, but you should see these same positions and recognize them as familiar because they have been part of the 5-year identified needs and staffing plan for the last 2 years.
If I may, Dr.
Yes,
Burnham.
please.
So in the school committee folder, there are two documents. There is the 5-year capital staffing plan. It's a PDF file. It goes. It's a spreadsheet. It identifies all these positions year by year. We'll post it on our website for the public to see. I want you to see it as well. So one thing, if you haven't noticed, there seemed to be a position, a new teaching position every single year. I think it started in grade 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's our bubble, and we suspect that we'll be reducing that FTE is going to follow that class through the grades. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're adding a teacher every single year. Once again, this is a presentation to talk about the identified need, not necessarily where it's coming from, but while I was looking at this presentation, I kept on seeing that teacher, it keeps on coming up. I just want to rest assured that that is following the bubble of students. So, and there's some other little plans that we have for some of these positions as well. So, so you can take a look at that PDF, and that's the 5-year capital staffing plan. And then in addition, there's a supplemental PDF file, which identifies all the new positions that we hired for last year. And it's kind of a color-coded document, which indicates funding sources. So please, if you have any questions on that, I'll be happy to answer them tonight, or we will be posting it to the website. So that's a good reference point for the committee and the public. Thank you.
So as part of this process, we also look at non-staffing needs that are identified needs. So there are a few, shall I say, the overarching areas. We know that climate and culture is a focus. We know that we need to do some work there. That work involves diversity, equity, and inclusion work. As you know, we've been doing this work. We're looking to partner with a consultant to continue doing this work. And based on a goal that you all have set for yourselves, there will be, a cost for an equity audit, but that, again, it's an identified need. It's not a staffing need, however. We know that we need to continue our work with standards-aligned curriculum and evidence-based curriculum materials, and continue to focus on data to inform all of that work. One of the things that we will need to, be committed to is finding a system for recording and archiving, sorting the data that we are accumulating, so that administrators have access to that data, teachers in the classroom have access to the data, so that it can inform the work that they do, whether it's a building level decision, program decisions, or classroom instruction and intervention. We know that we want to work toward regular routine data cycles. And that work, is underway, but that is going to continue to be a commitment. Every year we point out, the professional development needs And we know that we will continue to stay focused on civics and all the new requirements and changes with the new standards specifically related to civics. Literacy and math, particularly strong focus at the K-5 level. That DEI is that diversity, equity, and inclusion piece. Again, the staff is going to need professional development in that area. And we continue to look to provide professional development and strengthen tiered systems of supports, both academic and behavioral health supports. And then we have capital improvements. So you know that we, in lieu of an IT director, we're working with a company, and they are essentially conducting a bit of an assessment of the district and our needs. So we anticipate that we will have need in terms of technology, not just for devices, but for the actual infrastructure, the network in our buildings, as well as, you know, some facility improvement projects. Mr. Cassidy, did you have anything to add there?
No, I think especially for the capital improvements, we do have some identified needs, and that were proposed from our consultant, and then from our new facility director, and we're looking at all those plans very closely and trying to fund them.
So next steps. This will lead into the budget process. We actually began the budget process as we do every year over the summer. The leadership team comes together. We review and revise, if necessary, the strategy for continuous improvement. We revise those priority action plans, and we look to align school improvement plan goals with the goal areas of the strategy. And administrators and teachers look to develop goals for their evaluation that link back to those strategy objectives. So thinking about what work we need to do for that improvement begins with the leadership meetings in August and carries into early September with the goal planning as part of the evaluation process. By November and December, that's when the team is working to review the 5-year staffing plan from the year before. They're also submitting their FY23 budget requests. We review them carefully and hold individual meetings with principals and department leaders to better understand the nature of their needs. And in January, the priority needs that we looked at as part of year 1 of this 5-year staffing model, we will look at that as we develop the proposal for FY23, the budget. But again, we know that largely that list of positions is not, we're not going to be able to fund them through the local budget. They're there on the list, they're identified, as Mr. Cassidy said, should other funding sources become available. And it's been our experience thus far. It seems like every month there are new grants being posted through the state. So hopefully there will be some opportunity to fund some of those positions that are identified with grant monies, whether those be entitlement grants that we're going to get, or whether they're competitive grants that we have to submit a proposal for. Okay,
Yeah, we'll be seeking alternative funding. That's a phrase that we used last year to kind of table positions until for grants. So that may be a repeated phrase in the presentation a month from now.
and here's how the timeline plays out. Mr. Cassidy and I typically meet with the town manager in January. We also present a proposed budget to the school committee in January. That will be the second meeting in January. We also conduct staff presentations of that budget so that the teachers and other staff in the district have an understanding of what is in the budget and the rationale for what is in the budget. Last year, and you all can weigh in as to whether or not you want to continue with this element of the process, but last year we had scheduled budget Q&A sessions as an agenda item for the school committee meetings, one in February and one in March. And then we're looking to have that budget hearing for the school committee approval of a budget on March 16th at a regular meeting. And then we anticipate that we will be presenting, or at least tentatively, we're scheduled to present to the finance committee the very next evening on March 17th. And then, of course, final approval will be at town meeting, which will be May 7th. So that's a lot of information to process. So if you have questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Is there anyone on the committee with questions for Dr. Burnham? Mr. Leighton?
Thank you. So we heard in public comments about the athletic trainer. I'm pretty sure we've seen this before on this presentation, and it got bumped again down the line. Was that regards to COVID, not having the funding and other positions available? What was the rationale of bumping in another year? I just don't want to see it continually get bumped another year and another year.
Yeah.
There's an important position.
Yep. So there had been some talk in prior years that it might become a mandatory position. That hasn't happened yet. And I think when we wrestle with the priorities right now, we're still really focused in on the greatest need around the behavioral health, mental health, academic learning loss, and COVID physical health safety as kind of like the three big focus areas. I remember, earlier, a couple of years ago when that position was on, and we had a presentation with the finance committee, and there was some comment that, the staffing needs for the daytime school day, academics and social emotional would probably take a higher priority, or at the time should take a higher priority than the athletic director. I mean, the athletic trainer. Again, in order to get everything humming along the way we'd like for things to be, getting kids hot back up if there's learning loss, making sure that they have the behavioral health supports in place so that they can come to school, they can successfully sit in classroom spaces and access learning. That's a big priority. I mean, a year ago, or even more than a year ago, with the COVID shutdown, even the commissioner prioritized the social, emotional, mental health matters for students as the highest priority, even higher than the academics. So, you know, to wrestle with all of these things that we see as necessary to be really fully functioning and optimally functioning to meet everybody's needs. These are difficult conversations. They're difficult decisions to make. It's not that we don't see the benefit of having an athletic trainer. We do. We do. You know, it's a challenge for sure. I mean, if that's something that the committee wants us to prioritize, happy to have some feedback if that's a direction that you would want to go and prioritize.
No, I think in my opinion, I would agree. I would agree with you. I like the idea that it's on there. I just don't want to see it get bumped again and again. And again.
Are there any other questions from committee members? Well, then I just had a couple of small ones. Looking at the FY23 slide, for lack of a better word, I appreciate the STEM focus. I'm hoping there would be grants in that area to help with some of those positions, but I think that is something that is really necessary, is to pull that whole piece up, as well as the instructional math person for the elementary school. I understand the problem in finding somebody because everybody's looking for STEM people, and so it's very difficult. I did ask, I had written down the question about the 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade teacher moving up. I figured that one out. And it said specialist LPS, and I assume that part-time specialist is to help with common planning time. How is the subject area of that specialist going to be decided, rather than, you know, is there a specific subject area that you're looking at rather than just saying specialist?
So I think that we need to be a little bit flexible in considering that. I know that our music staff at the middle high school are strongly advocating for a music program, an instrumental music program during the school day at the elementary school. Again, that means hiring a music teacher. Additionally, we have some staff who are part-time, and if situations change and they're interested in picking up some additional FTE time, then we might be able to, you know, offer a current employee more hours and have some additional specialist scheduled time in the rotation. I will say that we, for the last couple of years, and we continue to do so, we're thinking outside of the box for Lunenburg Public Schools. We're talking about models that we might be able to use that have been used in other districts, like having science as a special in the rotation. And then you've got one teacher who focuses on science instead of science being an added content area that our teachers have to prepare and deliver, because our elementary teachers are truly right now at this point, it's really our K1, 2 are still self-contained classrooms. So all of those teachers have to teach all of those subjects. So again, we're talking about a variety of things right now that may work to continue to support that common planning time, which we feel is really essential.
Yeah. Particularly
Particularly for the curriculum shifts at K-5 around math and around literacy. There's a lot of work, and the state is looking for districts to utilize only curriculum materials that they have vetted and find to be quality and evidence-based. So we're looking at all of those materials as well as grant opportunities to fund some of the purchase of materials, curriculum programs, as well as the professional development to support teachers in the adoption of a new program. Lots of moving parts right now. Lots of creative thinking about how can we optimize what we have and continue to provide things like common planning time that we know are so important. So that's why it's like a little vague right now.
Yeah, well, I figured there was a reason why it was vague, but I was curious as to what that was. That answers my questions. Anyone else? The one other thing that you were talking about, the budget Q&A during February and March for the public. I know that like no one or one person showed up or something like that. I still think it's a valuable thing. I think it should be on the agenda. And if we don't get people participating, that's one thing, but the option was there for people to ask their questions. I don't know how other people feel, but that's clearly how I feel about that.
I completely agree with you.
Okay. So if there's nothing else, then we will move on. Thank you very much. I know it's a lot of work, and we appreciate the beginnings of the budgeting.
It's such an exciting time of year.
It is. It is. Next, we move on to the winter sports report.
So A.B. Bunnell couldn't be here for this meeting, but you do have a summary of the fall athletics. And I think it's important to note that we had 4 teams this past fall season receive MIAA state sportsmanship awards. That's really impressive. So we're talking about the football team, the field hockey, boys soccer, and girls soccer. So congratulations to all of those student athletes and their coaches for that recognition. That is something to really be proud of, I think. And then we also had teams receive academic excellence awards from the MIAA. The team has to have a certain GPA, and those with a team GPA of between 3.0 and 4.0 receive gold, and between 2.5 and 2.99 receive silver. And receiving gold this year, the boys cross country, the girls cross country, boys soccer, girls soccer, field hockey, and golf. And this year, football received the silver. So again, congratulations on the accomplishments. Clearly, this is an academic accomplishment as a team. So again, congratulations to all the students who work hard and still participate in athletics with good grades. And then you have a summary of the numbers for the winter season in each sport. This year for alpine ski, which again is a co-ed co-op, we have a total of 10. So that's an increase from previous. For girls basketball, we've got 28. For boys basketball, we've got 25, boys hockey at 20. That is also a co-op. Girls ice hockey, also a co-op with 7. The boys middle school basketball for grades 7 and 8, we have 12 students participating. For girls middle school basketball, 14. Boys indoor track, 44. That's a big jump up from last year. And girls indoor track, 34. I think it's also a testament to the coaches for those 2 teams. They have excellent coaches that, you know, really draw the kids and encourage the kids to join the track. You're building a
think-
program.
They had to be commended for the participation in the winter, and especially for the sportsmanship and scholastic achievements, as well as their achievement on the playing field in the fall. Any other comments by any of the committee members? Mr. Leighton?
Yeah, I would say I was impressed with the increase in track, and even more impressed that almost 50% of our high school students are participating in sports. I think that's great, and we hopefully can keep that up.
Which takes us back to the comment made by the student earlier about the importance of an athletic trainer, because so many of our students participate in athletics.
Absolutely. Well, then we'll move on to the next discussion item, which is a review of school committee roles and responsibilities survey. This survey we did, I don't know, spring of 2019 maybe, or 20. Was it not
I
during
think
the
it was
pandemic?
19.
It must have been 19. So, and we were concerned at that time, one of our goals was to make sure the community understood what it was we were tasked to do. And this survey clearly showed that there were many things that the community didn't understand about our job. So I think maybe we should go through these just to review them, and then talk about how we're going to inform the public. What, I know we had some ideas, but let's have some next steps when we're completed reviewing this, I think would be the way to go. The first question was, whom does the school committee represent? Thank you. Magically, it appears on the screen. Who does the school committee represent? And most people felt that the school committee represents the school staff, the community at large, the students, the taxpayers, and everybody, when actually our charge is to represent the students. That is the charge. So that obviously to represent the students well, you need to take care of the taxpayers and the families and the community at large, but the focus is on the student. And so that's something we need to work on. The second question, what does the school committee govern? Once again, day-to-day operations, some people felt, staff conduct, some people felt. The budget was a correct answer, and that got many answers. Policy is correct as well. Scheduling facilities is not something we are supposed to do. Hiring and evaluating the superintendent is, of course, something we do. And the curriculum is not something we do. So once again, there are a lot of misconceptions. Question number 3, what is the best way to communicate with the school committee? Social media was one thought. Email got the most votes and is probably the most effective way to do it. Public comment, is another way that you certainly can communicate with the school committee, but there are some topics that can't be broached through public comment because of student privacy laws. So sometimes email is better. Out and about in the community, the supermarket, that's not a good place to do that. Through the superintendent, of course, if you do go through the superintendent, you can, but that's probably not your most efficient way to do so. So once again, that's something we need to address. Question 4, what is the school committee's role during public comment? To listen, to answer questions, to debate, or to take notes. Public comment is just that, public comment. Not a time to debate, not a time to get into a discussion. It is public comment. And the last question, is it no, it's not the last. Who can speak on behalf of the school committee? Per our protocols that we have set up, the only person who speaks on behalf of the school committee in public is the school committee chair, unless, of course, the school committee chair refers it to the superintendent or to someone else on the committee. And number 6, that one is the last one. A school committee meeting is a meeting of the school committee held in public, not a public meeting. And that is true. That, and most people understood that, not by a lot, but most people understood that. So with that survey in mind, I think it serves as a good baseline for any work we do, because we didn't do a lot of this during the pandemic. Any thoughts by the committee on how we can approach this? I mean, I know we had talked about social media and maybe an article in the Ledger, maybe something on PAC or.
Mhm.
Any thoughts on what would be first steps?
I think since we already have social media established, maybe we could broach that, but also the Ledger. I feel as though that was pretty eye-opening to see that a lot of people do not understand what we govern, and it would be helpful for them to be more aware of what our roles are and what we're able to kind of see. A lot of the comments that come in, unfortunately, we're not able to have any jurisdiction over. So I think it would be pretty good to see whether do we go through the social media or even just the article in the Ledger first, just to reiterate, this is the role of the Lunenburg School Committee.
Well, we could do an article for the Ledger and then have the same article show up on the social media.
Perfect.
And that would cover both bases. I don't mind drafting something. Or if somebody else would like to jump in and draft something, that's okay with me. But I don't mind drafting something that we could look at. Are we in agreement that that is probably the most vital place to start? Mr. Schoenbruni, would you, having not been part of this group till very recently, do you think that most people in the public are aware that that's what our role is?
No, I think that the recent national news stories about school boards have significantly clouded the public's understanding of what school boards do. I mean, I had an idea that they did not control curriculum, but that's just because I'd done legal work with school districts in New Hampshire. So I don't think anybody has, I mean, like, I don't even think the average person knows the difference between a paraprofessional and a teacher, which is sort of fundamental. So I think that the school committee's concern about a lack of public understanding is correct.
Okay, thank you. So then I'll draft some. Mr. Leighton.
Yeah, I would just say that I think the ledger article is great too, and I think we could even incorporate how the election would be in May, and even get information to the people who are considering running, because I think that's important too.
Oh,
But I
absolutely.
also think definitely keep following up with the social media, because only so many people are going to be reading the article. So if we can put that article out on social media, great. But if not, then we should again continue to get that information out on social media. Our posts don't have to be just the meetings, but even just information. As long as it's not a debate, I think we can keep putting out information about what the school committee does.
I
Okay,
can continue to keep updating the Facebook page. I'm not proficient in Twitter. I honestly don't even know what exactly a tweet is. So Brian or Sophie, feel free to take that back over. Or if we just want to continue with the Facebook page for now, or even updating our website.
Mr. Schoenbrini.
Does anybody know if any of the kids run a podcast, any of the kids in the school, about local happenings, even if it's not a kid? Maybe, does anybody run a podcast about Lunenburg town activities? Because, you know, I don't know how people get their information, but, you know, we're all sort of siloed into these different media universes, and a lot of people that I know get information from podcasts. So like, I noticed that Mason had a significantly nicer setup than all of us. So maybe Mason knows if somebody, Mason looks like he has a Twitch setup. So maybe he has a better idea about who does, you know, new kinds of media broadcasts. And if somebody could get on a podcast about Lunenburg and say, this is what we do, that tends to be a more direct connection than, you know, I don't want to say that the newspaper is old, but the newspaper is not as direct as other ways of doing it. So maybe that's an idea.
That is an idea.
Ask Mason.
The only podcast that I know of that took place in Lunenburg schools was one years ago my husband did with middle school students to talk about what happened in the middle school that week. Other than that, I don't know of any podcast that I am aware of. So maybe that's something we could talk to Mrs. Foyle about for the civics group.
Or maybe Dylan Picnarsik might be interested in working on that. He was our student rep last year.
Right. Yeah, maybe he would be. So we have some thoughts on that. That sounds good. Well, I will sketch something out for next week, and we'll see what we can come up with. Not next week, next year, actually, our next meeting. That gives me lots of time. So
When you have it drafted, you can give it to me and I'll drop it into a folder so
Okay.
that the others can see it.
that sounds good. And then we can talk about it at our next meeting. All right. So we have a plan on how to go about working on this. Are there any other comments on this particular topic that we want to talk about this evening?
I would just add that it seemed like we were planning to do like the survey probably around like April, May, continue that same survey and see how the numbers change.
Yes. That sounds like a plan. Okay. Well, then we'll move on to old business, the town bylaws. So we were in this spot where we were wondering about, there were revolving accounts in the bylaws that were our responsibility, and I see Mr. Cassidy has looked into it. So Mr. Cassidy, can you help us with this?
Good evening, Mike Cassidy, Business Manager. I did some research. So there, I was a little confused because there is, the town has a facility account and the school department has a facility account. So I did reach out to the town accountant, finance director, Karen Brochu, and we just kind of got to the bottom of this and what the bylaws were directly referring to. So what they were referring to is the facility account that I guess that John Londa kind of have been managing for years. And so the revenues generated from that are specifically from users of our fields and buildings. So it has nothing to do with TCP. So if someone rents TCP, we're not getting that money. That's because it's a town building. I know
Right.
that. In addition, we talked about the green thumb. Correct me if I'm right, it's not referred as, is it referred as the green thumb in the policy?
I think it is.
Yeah, it is, okay. So we, so that is that's an old account. It had a lot to do with the greenhouse.
Right.
And at one point it was we actually had gotten some state funding many years
Oh.
ago. And so we were able to deposit the money into the revolving account. It was a revolving account that the students would use to buy supplies. And then any revenues from the sales of the plants would go back into the account. And let me just backtrack just a bit. The money that we got from the state paid for the greenhouse manager. So that's how old that was. That was many.
Yeah.
I even think that was even right before me. So it's been a little while. So what I did is I did a report. And I downloaded it into the school committee folder. I manage these every single month or so. I just go through all the revolving accounts. So the files look different because they're basically internal documents. It's something that we use. It's not, the format's a lot different than what is given to you for the quarterly reports and some other financial reporting. So I wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel. I was just trying to give you raw data of what we have for your internal controls. So Karen Brochu mentioned that these two revolving accounts are reauthorized at the town meeting every single year. So they can be used for activities and costs that are associated with this. So we got that. She checked on that, and that was definitely covered. So we're not at risk at losing this money. So so those spreadsheets are in the folder. I can, if it's the will of the committee, I can report it out on these revolving accounts with the quarterly reports. That's, I guess that's my recommendation. Or if you want them, I mean, there's just not a lot of activity happening in these accounts right now. And then they're not at any risk of going into a negative. So I'm not, I do update them. So, but I update them just as a formality for the business office. We're not really tracking, these accounts as at risk. So, so I can provide updates because you're in charge of these accounts.
My concern to begin with was why were these two accounts in the bylaws and no other revolving account in the bylaws? If they're reauthorized at town meeting each year, then that's probably why, I think.
Right.
I mean, that makes sense to me. I don't know what anybody else thinks, but that would explain to me why they pulled these two out of all. That's,
Yeah.
I didn't understand if we needed to put them all in the bylaws or take these out, but that makes sense to me now.
Okay.
If that's what the situation is. I don't think we need a quarterly reporting, maybe once a year, just to know what's going on, or, but I don't think we need to make you do this every quarter. Other people have other thoughts?
I agree. I like the once a year would be sufficient.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for figuring that out. So
Yeah,
with that, that should be the end of what we need to do for the town bylaws then. Any other thoughts on that? Okay, then can I do an action on this?
Yes.
Can I have a motion to accept leaving the town bylaws regarding schools as they are for this review? And I will pass that on to the bylaw committee.
So moved.
And is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor? We need a roll call as we are on
Yes.
the Zoom.
Okay. Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
Mr. Schoenbrini,
Yes.
Mrs. Archambault.
Yes. Thank you. I will report that out to the bylaw committee. And thank you, Mr. Cassidy, for doing all that running around on that one.
my pleasure.
Next up is the school bus transportation. Now that's a lot of running around.
So there is a report in the school committee file. It is rather lengthy.
Mhm.
A lot of the information, and do have some slides that we're going to go through, but that report really reflects some of the updates we've been providing the school committee over the last couple months, just encapsulated in some sort of report. And then there are, especially around the surveys, there's just a lot of information. And, you know, when I wrote the report for the superintendent, I was hoping to draw out some statistics that would maybe just resonate in some of the members' minds. So as far as making a decision moving forward. So there are a lot of statistics on the survey. I'm just hoping that some of them connect with you and help you make a decision. So let's just bring the public up to speed on where we stand with the transportation update. Can you see that, everyone?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we started this process because the business office is going to be doing an invitation for bids in January, and with a bid deadline in February. So that's really where the conversation's really centered between administration and the school committee. The 3-year contract is expiring. If we were going to do any changes, now's the time to consider them and include them in the bid. So, excuse me. It is the plan that we're going to have the invitation to bid to the school committee on the January 5th, 2022 meeting. And quite frankly, the document is already done. It's just, it'll be presented to you for approval and to move forward to bid. That is the practice of the committee for anytime we bid the transportation contract. The invitation for bid will be available on January 10th for the public to get copies of. And then the Thursday, February 17th, there's a deadline for a bid. And then finally, on March 2nd, the administration will move forward a recommended vendor to move forward on a contract, Rick. So they'd be accepting the bid and moving forward on a contract. So previously, I talked about, we're governed by transportation in two areas, which is the local policy, which transports all kindergarten, grade 1 and grade 2 students, and students in grades 3 to 4 who live 1.5 miles or more from their school. And then the DESE, or the state policy, basically extends any student that lives 2 miles beyond, it says the nearest bus stop, is entitled to transportation if they're within the grades of K to 6. So where our policy is more open than the state, but that's really, those are the two governing policies that the school that we're governed by. So our current ridership. So right now we have 10 buses rolling in the morning and 10 buses rolling in the afternoon. We had bid the previous contract with a 11th bus, and that 11th bus is just for Turkey Hill and primary school in the morning and the afternoon. But due to the enrollment, they're able to run our students with 10 buses. So as I referenced in the report, there'll be a little savings this year under our transportation budget. Also reflected in the report is a ridership survey that our contractor did 2 days in September. And what you're seeing here is the morning middle high school bus and the afternoon high school bus, middle high school bus. And what I did is I took the highest amounts of those buses every single day, and that was kind of like the maximum that we were seeing in those buses those days. And then for the primary, and I'm sorry, the heading is off a little, I apologize for that. It's about 480 students in the morning and in the afternoon. There is a slight drop off in the middle high school afternoon bus by about 20 students. We're anticipating that is due to athletics, students being enrolled in athletics, because the survey was taken during fall season. So there's a lot of information like this in the report, and your eyes can get a little cross-eyed trying to figure out some of this stuff. So really just read this information very carefully. 12 of the 16 districts transport all students even less than a mile, and then the 2 remaining district transport riders over a mile, and the other 2 transport on the grade level and distance. So there's fluctuation. So there was one district that was transporting younger grades, and as the students were at the high school level, they stopped transporting them. 7 of the 16 districts charge family for transportation, and 3 districts charge families who live less than 2 miles and have students from grades 7 to 12. Now, the 7 to 12 group is a group that isn't covered by the state law for transportation, so that they charge those families. 2 other districts only charge families who have riders that attend 7 to 12. So those districts, they meet that K to 6, and anyone beyond that, they charge. 1 district charges families who live less than a mile and a mile and a half from their school. Another district charges families who have students grades 1 to 4 and then greater than a mile. There's all these little variants to kind of set the charges. Annual fees vary from $180 to $350 per year. And a number of districts have that reduction or a maximum per family. So more students that come in, there's a reduction in pay with a maximum per family. In the report, which is not in this PowerPoint, are all the details from other districts. So you can get to see what other districts charge. So the school committee has that information in the report. There was a question from the school committee. 6 out of the 7 districts reported that they had witnessed little or slight change in the drop-offs and pickups with the charging or opening up transportation for everybody. So it really didn't make they didn't see a noticeable impact. They couldn't quantify it. It was just kind of an observation. So a lot of information. It's not crystal clear. Every district does the transportation a little bit differently, which is going to make this decision a little bit harder. May have been last school committee meeting or the one before. We dug into the data of what are we talking about? If we were expanding our ridership for all students in the district, well, we know that every student at the primary gets transportation. So really the group that we're really focused in on are the students that are going to be at Turkey Hill next year, at Lunenburg Middle School next year, and at the high school next year. So we went into our database and we had identified 188 students that are within a mile and a half that are technically, that they are ineligible under the district's policy. So 188 students, and I believe those 188 students came from 142 families. So at that point, we had the 142 families. We knew the students, we knew their grades, that they would be attending next year. So we had some data to move forward on to do a survey. So we rolled out a survey to parents, and this was right before Thanksgiving and over Thanksgiving weekend, and asked them to participate in this survey. So 75 families of the 142 families participated in the survey. 20 of the 72 families have students at the primary or another school in the district. 9 of the 75 families have a student at the primary school and Turkey Hill. And I just want to be clear, because I don't want to say this over and over again. So this is not 9 families will have a student at the primary school in Turkey Hill next year. So this is data for next year. It's not current. It's what we're anticipating next year. 19 out of the 75 families will only have 1 student in the district next year. And then 34 families that responded have their students participating in sports. So when I say sports, it's one or all of the 3 seasons. So if one of their students were going to attend, that's 1 season, that's one of the 34. So this is kind of a, why is this slide important, so to speak? This kind of represents just what kind of families may need the transportation for next year. And some of their, just based upon our questions, some of the struggles that they might be having. Okay, so the previous slide talked about the respondents, the families that responded. This was the survey highlights to the questions about how likely they would take advantage of the transportation. So 81% of the families that responded said that they would definitely use transportation next year if it's made available. 51 of the 63 families that responded that would take transportation every day would use it in the morning and the afternoon. 25 of the 63, or 40%, would definitely use the transportation, and they were willing to pay. And then 71 out of the 73 families would definitely or probably use transportation every day. So that just to step back, remember that the survey was definitely use transportation, probably use transportation, would consider using transportation. And then it was not likely to use transportation and would not use transportation. So that's a bigger group of families that probably use and definitely would use. So 42 out of the 71 families would definitely or probably use transportation every day. This is where I might lose you. Would definitely or probably will pay. So once again, that group includes two response groups. It's just not would definitely pay. It's probably definitely and probably will. So it's a big group. And then even a bigger group is the 54 of the 71 would definitely, probably, or would consider paying for transportation next year. And then 12 of the 72 probably would not, or definitely would not use transportation if there was a charge. So if there is a charge being contemplated in the new policy, we're gonna start losing families. We're gonna lose that percentage, 12 of the 72, and then we may even end up losing a little bit more that are kind of in the middle of the bubble. So options. So these are some projected costs that I came up with if we were going to expand the student transportation or student ridership for everybody in the district. Granted, we did not have 100% response to our survey. We did get some solid percentages of the people that did reply. We know that there's going to be a fall off if there is if we start charging a fee. But we know that there's going to be a high ridership if there is no fee. So with that, we're anticipating in option one. Option one is expand transportation to all students with no fee, meaning not charging families. And that would include adding a bus and a half. So that's a bus and a half. So let me go back to a previous slide, which is we currently have 10 buses. We had budgeted 10 and a half buses. So this FY23 projected budget is adding a bus and a half. So we'd be running with 12 buses. And there's an increased cost of $143,000 2015, or 215. And let me just say, that is that amount includes a projected increase for the buses next year. Option 2, expand transportation to all students with a fee. So that's what we would probably go down just to adding one bus, knowing that we would lose some students. And if we were to charge students about $180 per year, we would raise about $20,000. That would bring the cost down. In the report, there's a section that I highlight that there's no way this isn't my decision, but the cost, if we want to pass these costs on to families, for the families that are ineligible, the price is very, very expensive for families. That's the school committee's decision, but the $180 is not going to come close to covering the projected costs. So I think at the last school committee meeting, I referenced these districts that charge these families in their district. They are not, there's absolutely no way they are covering the costs for their buses. So the local budget is helping the ridership that they have to charge. So option 2, once again, expand transportation to all students with a fee. There's a projection of $92,975 for that option. And then finally, option 3, which is there's no change, with a projected cost of $38,475. That is the amount of a projected increase for our new transportation contract for next year. That's all that is. Lunenburg Public Schools has a long-standing practice that if there are empty seats on the bus, then we open the buses up for families within 1.5 miles. So that is, when I say no change, that is included within that change. We would still invite families that are within 1.5 miles to the ridership. No seats will be left open if possible. So that's the final option. Those are the 3 options I see. The 38,000 is the only amount that I included when we were doing collective bargaining. The additional 60,000 for option 2 and the additional 100,000 for option 1 was not considered when we were negotiating with the teachers and the paras and custodians and CAF workers. So, so I think some of you may have seen that 38,000 in some of my presentations. So that number shouldn't be a shock for you. So next steps and questions. So I gave you a lot of information. I don't think I gave you the answers. And as I said at the beginning of my conversation with the school committee is I hope that there's some bullets. I hope there's some statistics. I hope there's maybe a budget number that can help you make a decision whether or not you want to move forward in changing the policy. Maybe it's a whole bunch of bullets, and maybe some of, so you can see some of the connections in the need for these families. But you do have some other district information on what other districts do for charging and some parameters for charging. Even that information is split really right down the middle. So, you know, it's, you almost want like a majority from a sister community or a sister district, you know, and say, yep, you know, all these districts do not charge, we're going to do it. We don't want to be different. So, you know, the committee's instincts were right. There is a lot of changes. There's a lot of things that are being done in and around other districts. This process was certainly eye-opening for me. When I started going through the information, I was rather shocked on some of my impressions from other communities, and when I saw the data, I was surprised. So I guess the next steps. There's a lot of information here, you know, and look at it. If the committee wants to make a decision tonight, that's great. But we still have another meeting at the beginning of January. We can even go as far as the middle of January if you want. I say we can go in the middle of January. The bid will be out, and if the committee decides to increase the buses, I can do an amendment or an addendum. I'm sorry, to the bid. Not a big issue. You may have other questions. I mean, we can talk about it. I'm going to open the floor back up to the chairperson to the committee. You may have questions tonight. There may be other questions moving forward. Once again, I wish I could give you clear, concise direction on this, but I laid out a lot of facts, and I hope those facts assist the school committee in making a decision on this policy change. So I'll turn it back over to the chair for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. That's a lot of information. Not unexpected, but a lot of information for sure. Are there any questions from the committee members? Mr. Leighton?
Thank you. I had two questions. First for Mr. Cassidy. So you had presented these three options. Do you have a professional opinion on whether the budget can handle those increases in option one and option two? Or are these going to be drastic increases that are going to be really changing our budget?
I don't think it's sustainable in option 1 and 2 without making drastic cuts in the local budget. So, but it's the will of the committee that if you say option 1 and option 2, then we as the administration will dig deep into the budget. But you know, Mr. Leighton, the budget is primarily staff. So you would probably be looking at reduction in staff. Certainly we'd be looking at our expense line items. I'll say this publicly, we're not anticipating a reduction in insurance next year. So like we did this year. So I think we're going to be getting back to just some sort of increase. We're not really sure what that's looking like, but it's not going to be a negative increase. like we happen to get this year. So it's probably not the answer what you want to hear, but we'll work with the committee if that's something that you want to look at.
Thank you. My second question, I think, might be to Dr. Burnham, more on operational and procedure. So as the school year begins and we have these open seats and we look for families who are interested in seats who are on, say, this wait list, if we go into an option 1 or an option 2, and now they can either pay or just enroll into the bus, would this create a better operational procedure where you have more time to set up the bus planning and get everybody in their seats?
In a non-COVID time, I would say yes, because largely the bus company is going to have the numbers of kids on different streets, and they'll be able to figure out how many kids at each bus stop. The vendor that we use currently tends not to change bus routes or bus stops. If we land with that same vendor again, I would expect that those bus stops and bus routes would remain the same. We would have the 2 additional buses. So I'm not sure how that would figure in terms of the existing bus routes. I don't know if they would just double up on the heavier routes, because there are some that are more heavily populated routes than the others. We will still have to manage bus changes. Kiddos might move during the school year, so we'd have to make sure that the bus company was aware of the move, the change of the bus assignment, etc. I don't think it would be as heavy a demand administratively from our end. There still will be some involvement. I think if we're charging a fee, there's definitely going to be need for somebody to help manage, because we're going to have to collect the fees. We're going to have to track all of that. We're still going to have, some level of administrative attention to bus changes, etc. And I think if we were to stay with the existing practice and policy, the challenge is we always get new students registering throughout the summer, and this year well into the first several weeks of the school year. And many of those students fall into those categories that we're either mandated by law to transport or by school committee policy to transport. So when I've got a bunch of names on a list who live within the 1.5 miles, and parents are anxious, they want to know about the bus, I can't give away all the seats because then we're in a sticky spot when I can't provide a seat for kids who register in the early weeks of September. And that's something that I had communicated out to all of the families. It's complicated. It's not as simple as just getting another bus. It's not as simple as, what's the big deal? The bus rides right by my house, right? Yeah, yes, it absolutely does. But it's challenging. And there's an awful lot of management in the current model, which is why I feel pretty strongly that with either option 2 or 3, we're going to need clerical support. I can tell you that Liz Peterson, my assistant, has been handling all of this now, all of last year and so far this year. And it truly is a part-time job in and of itself. But Liz also has many other responsibilities that fall to her. And this is just extremely time consuming. And I feel really strongly that none of our staff should have to work a 12, 13, 14-hour day to get the work done to a level that keeps us up at not completely done, not completely done at the end of 14 hours, but keeps us at a place where we're not really behind. So it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable for Liz to continue to work those kind of hours. So we do need some added support. Mr. Cassidy, you have any comments on the need for added clerical support to help manage the transportation?
You said everything. I also feel that, holding the vendor accountable a little bit more. I'm not sure who's going to be the bidder who gets this contract, but there are new systems that should make this easier instead of hand counts and spreadsheets and so I'd like to see a vendor have the latest and greatest ways of tracking students and just managing a ridership on each bus. You mentioned this, Dr. Bernard, the great thing, if there's one really good thing about the operations of changing this policy, is that all the students are within 1.5 miles of their school. So all the buses are coming into the school, right? So it's not like they're making roundabout trips to get extra students, right? Like Dr. Brennan said, they're driving right by houses and stuff. It's just there's not enough buses and there's not enough seats to drive to necessarily on some days and on some buses to pick those kids up. So I can understand the parents' frustrations, but it's the rules are the rules, I guess. So so operationally, I don't think that's going to be an issue for the bus company, but it is troubling around management on ridership. It's falling back on the district.
Okay, any other questions from the committee?
I'd like to just echo what Mr. Cassidy just said. It's a tough situation because I think all of us can understand the frustrations of these families who are relying on transportation and they're not guaranteed it. I mean, families have to work and they need to get the kids to school. But I guess my concern is, we're going to accommodate this, but then we're going to take away from staffing and curriculum. And ultimately, we're going to do a disservice to the students and not providing this high level of education that they are deserving of. So it is really a tough situation to kind of find this balance and serve each student. But are we going to be able to provide transportation to each student in order to give them the best education? I don't think it's possible right now.
Anything else? Mrs. Scalabrini?
Is it, and I don't know the answer, this is like a genuine question. Is it possible to offload the administrative tasks to the vendor as part of the bidding process?
Yes and no. we need to know which students are on which bus and up to date. And quite frankly, and I've talked about this in prior years, the opening weeks of school, with change of plans. My kiddo usually takes the bus home, but today his grandmother's going to come pick him up. And 2 days later, change of plans, I'm coming to pick him up. Or can you please put him on bus 6 instead of bus 4 because he's going to go to his grandmother's house. There is a significant volume of daily dismissal, transportation, change requests. It's tricky. It's yes, part of it could be absorbed by the vendor, but in the end, we have the responsibility for making sure that everybody gets where they're supposed to, and you know, on the proper bus or car line or
Yeah.
and right now, we, for the last year plus, we've worked to streamline the communications and therefore minimize the number of errors, if you will. Bus didn't stop at the bus stop to pick a kid up because they didn't know that the kid was being added to the bus, or any number of things. So we funneled all of the communication rather than through each school's secretary calling the bus company multiple times a day. Everything funneled through my office so that there was more streamlined communication between the school department and the bus company. And we were on top of changes and we were documenting the changes. Whereas previously, all of these things were done by each school secretary. And again, changes might be made that aren't executed. And there's, you know, room for mistakes to happen. I don't like bus transportation mistakes to happen because that is extremely distressing to parents, particularly at the end of the day. You know, if your kiddo got on the wrong bus and doesn't arrive home, that's an awful place emotionally to have a parent. So those types of errors really, they can't happen. It is extremely distressing to families when they do. So it sounds like a very simple issue, but in reality, it's very complex. It's complex, and there is a high volume of change request routinely, not COVID related.
Okay, thank you. I had a couple of questions. One was the option 3 with no change. That's still 10 buses, not 11.
That's 10 and a half. Yeah, it's 11 buses, but it's like the 10 and a half buses.
It's
So
the 10.
it's 10, and then the half is Turkey Hill primary in the morning and the afternoon.
An added
Okay.
bus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
an added. Yeah.
And we did ask, we were working for several weeks early in the year with D-Bus to get that 11th bus back for the primary Turkey Hill run in the morning and the afternoon, because again, we have extended day and we're transporting those kids from extended day in the morning to school, and then at the end of the day from school back. And the challenge this year, there are no drivers.
Right.
So it just was not a feasible option to alleviate and move along more quickly the placement of kiddos on a wait list onto a bus.
Another question was, all these projections were done with assuming that the cost, if people were paying, was going to be $180 per student. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's under option 2. It was,
Under 2.
yeah,
yeah.
$180. And
But
that didn't include a family max.
That's what I was wondering.
Okay, or, you know, if the school committee wanted a reduction, 180 for the first child, 150 for the second, you know, 400 max per family. So that was just a straight rider, 180, period.
Okay. And the cost of a transportation coordinator was not figured in these numbers. Is that correct?
They were not.
Okay. Well, those were my questions. Mr. Leighton?
Thanks. So sorry, you threw out some numbers. I wasn't sure if Mr. Cassidy had thrown out what the cost would be, and I saw this. It was $921 per student if the fee was actually going to cover the cost of the bus.
Yes. I hesitated saying that amount, but that was to scare people away. But yeah,
Well, I think that's what's
you know,
scary.
that's,
Like,
yeah, that's 70. You know, that's charging 77 riders. You know, the $921 is going to cover that cost of a bus for the entire year.
yeah, and it's not feasible to be charging families that amount. And this is the scary part, is that we need the funding, whether it's from the state or the federal government. Locally, we're not getting this money to be able to provide these services. So we got to get the money somewhere. And like Laura was saying, we can't cut the services of the educational services that these students need.
Yeah.
So I need to know what the will of the committee is. Do we want to take the next couple weeks and look at all these numbers and see if we can think of anything magical that's going to make it work? Or do we want to vote on this now? Whole lot of hesitating tells me maybe we should wait. Mr. Leighton?
My thought is, I think the committee is probably ready now. And I think it would also give Mr. Cassidy time to plan. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, sadly, I do agree. Unfortunately, the numbers just aren't going to change, and it's obviously not the outcome we all want, but I think it's what's necessary.
Okay, then I would need a motion. Mr. Leighton?
I'll make a motion that we approve option 3 as presented.
I
And
will
a second?
second that motion.
And a roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
Mr. Schoenbrini, and Mrs. Archambault.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for allowing us the added time
Well,
to move forward.
it's unfortunate, but it doesn't seem to be another way around it at this point in time. Okay, next we have first read of policy 1202, regulations governing the use of school facilities. I did receive a letter from the Parks Commission, but I think I would like to have the policy read first, and then I will read the letter in its entirety, so people have that background. So is there someone to read the policy? Mr. Leighton?
Yes. Community Relations 1000, Community Use of School Facilities 1200, Regulations Governing the Use of School Facilities 1202. It is the policy of the Lunenburg School Committee to permit responsible organizations where the main purpose is to benefit the citizens of Lunenburg, the use of school buildings and athletic fields to the extent that there is no interference with the educational programs. The complete control of the school building and equipment is by law vested in the school committee, and the administration of the rules and regulations governing the buildings is delegated to the superintendent of schools or his or her designee. Use of school facilities shall be granted within the limits prescribed in Chapter 71, Section 71 of the Massachusetts General Laws and Act, an amendment or addition thereto. This policy covers all functions, events which are held in the Lunenburg Public Schools after school hours, Monday through Friday, and anytime on Saturdays and Sundays. School facilities are not available to private individuals for personal profit. Non-school organizations utilizing the schools are charged custodial costs and fees based upon a schedule approved by the school committee. Facility rental fees for Lunenburg governmental bodies executing governmental functions will be waived, but custodial and other related event costs will be charged. Facility rental fees for town recreational sponsored programs, with the exception of youth sports seasonal programs, will be waived. Custodial or other related costs will be charged. Priorities for use of school facilities. Use of the school facilities for annual town meeting and for polling is reserved for the town on the first and third Saturdays in May and the first Tuesday in November during annual town meeting. The school facilities and grounds will be available for use and other than scheduled academic testing. Priorities for use of school facilities, including buildings, playgrounds, and athletic fields, shall be as follows. 1. Lunenburg school activities, student performances, student athletic events, dances, graduation, school councils, school committee, etc. Number 2, Lunenburg community school programs and activities. Number 3, Lunenburg school support groups, PTO, PAC, SAL, etc. 4, Lunenburg youth sports organizations. 5, Lunenburg town related. 6, Lunenburg youth related nonprofit organizations, Scouts. 7, Lunenburg nonprofit groups. 8, community recreational use, non-scheduled Lunenburg resident use of tennis courts, basketball courts, track field, playgrounds, etc. Number 9, all other. Scheduling. Priority. Number 1, Lunenburg public school activities receive priority over the other organizations for the use of buildings and fields. 2, Lunenburg public schools administration, faculty, and staff are required to complete applications for the use of their own buildings and fields. Cancellations. Number 1, scheduled activities may be preempted by the Lunenburg public school activities only with the permission of the superintendent of schools and provided a notice of no less than 72 hours is given to the permitted organization. 2, on the days when school has been canceled because of emergency conditions, the school building and grounds may not be available. However, all scheduled use will automatically be canceled unless the renter contacts the school being rented to confirm the availability of the school. Conditions of use of all facilities. All facilities use requests must be completed online. Contact the director of facilities for access to the system. Certificate of insurance, if applicable, must be submitted to the director of facilities. 1, it is required that all renters obtain and review this policy in its entirety. All renters must sign an acknowledgement form indicating that they have received and reviewed this policy. 2, there are certain restrictions upon the use of school property in the building. The user is solely responsible for the fulfillment of the regulations of the following. A, State Department of Public Safety. B, state and local fire laws. C, state and local police laws. D, internal revenue admission laws. E, state laws relating to rental of school facilities. 3, organizations, any group or an entity excluding the Lunenburg Public Schools using school buildings or grounds under a permit from the superintendent's office are restricted to the use of the rooms and/or spaces assigned to them. Participants found wandering unsupervised in a school building will be immediately escorted out of the facility. The sponsor of the activity will be notified. 4, organizations using school buildings will use only one designated entry and exit. An adult, an individual other over the age of 21 must be present during the entire duration of the activity to monitor and control the entering and existing of children participating in the activity. Organizations are required to provide adult supervision at the entrance of the facility during the entire duration of the event to ensure the safety of the participants and the facility. 5, specific bathroom facilities will be designated for use and only those bathrooms will be accessible. The organization using the building will be responsible for monitoring these bathrooms. 6, use of tobacco and/or nicotine products, alcohol, marijuana, and other illicit substances are prohibited on school property. 7, the applicant must be present throughout the time and the facilities are being used. The applicant is responsible for the decorum of the group, including spectators. 8, when minors are using a facility, they're required to have supervision on a 1-to-10 ratio basis. At least one adult 21 years or older must be present at all times. 9, food and or beverages are only permitted in cafeterias, all-purpose rooms. Eating or drinking in auditoriums or gymnasiums is not permitted. Only prepackaged food and beverages for resale are allowed through the concession stand. Any damages sustained to the facility and or equipment during its use will be considered the responsibility of the renting facility. The renting organization will be billed for any repairs needed to restore the facility and or equipment to its original state. 11, no electrical apparatus shall be connected to any lighting system unless it is first inspected and approved by the district approved auditorium manager or technical staff personnel. 12, in all cases where gymnasiums are used for athletic purposes, participants are required to wear athletic shoes. 13, cleats, turf shoes are not permitted on the track. Participants must not put cleats, turf shoes on until participants are on the turf field. 14, school kitchens are available only when proper lunchroom employees are employed at an additional expense to supervise and protect the interests of the Lunenburg Public Schools. Applicants must contact the food services director to arrange for the specifics and receive an estimate of the costs. 15, entrance to the property shall be permitted only via the designated entrance for the school in use. All doors to the facility shall remain locked at all times, except that custodial personnel shall unlock main entry doors for entrance by authorized groups as scheduled 15 minutes before and after scheduled start. 16, access to facility will be available only as indicated on the approved applicant form. 17, equipment of the building user, such as scenery and furniture, may not be moved into or out of the building during the school hours. 18, anyone utilizing the MSHS auditorium must employ school personnel appropriately trained to operate the lighting, curtains, drops, scenery, etc. It is the policy of the Lunenburg Public Schools not to loan school materials and equipment to individuals or groups. 19, all vehicles are strictly prohibited from parking in fire lanes. There shall be no double parking. There shall be no parking in handicap designated spaces without the proper RMV issued placards and license plates. This will be enforced by the Lunenburg Police Department, and any violators are subject to being ticketed and or towed. 20, there should be no parking or driving on any school property in conjunction with any function unless prior approval is granted by the superintendent. Upon approval, a permit will be issued and must be displayed while on school grounds. Any vehicle on school property must be operated by licensed drivers. 21, all non-school and town governmental related activities must be completed and the premises vacated by 10 p.m. Personnel. 22, the custodian on duty shall be responsible for the supervision of the building and equipment, safety precautions in the building, cleaning of the building after its use, and for any services required by the renter in accordance with the use of the facilities approved. 23, custodians have no responsibility to groups other than as described above. 24, police coverage may be required for particular activity. The applicant is responsible for making these arrangements and for payment of the same. 25, school facilities are not available for use without a custodian on duty. Advertising. The district is not responsible for advertising of non-school events. Any advertising associated must identify by name the sponsoring group. Insurance coverage. The organization shall procure and maintain insurance against claims for injuries or losses to persons or property that are alleged to have arisen in connection with the activities underlying this application of the organization, and any agents, representatives, or employees. Insurance companies must be licensed by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or otherwise acceptable to the school department. The cost of such insurance, including required endorsements and amendments, shall be the sole responsibility of the organization. Full disclosure is required for any non-standard exclusions. 1, a copy of the certification of insurance with minimum limits of $3 million for general liability covering bodily injury and property damage combined, and any personal injury must be attached to the application and forwarded to the director of facilities for review prior to the date of the activity and before final approval for use is granted. 2, all certificates of insurance must include the town of Lunenburg as additional named insured. Cleanup. Neither the school department nor its custodian on duty assumes any responsibility for liability to the property of the renter. 2, all decorations, furniture, trash, and other materials used shall be removed immediately by the renter after the completion of the function. All decorations must be fire resistant. Changing equipment, electrical adjustments, driving nails, or hanging decorations shall be done only with the consent of the director of facilities. At no time shall objects be attached to stage curtains. 3, Lunenburg Public Schools will not be responsible for any materials left behind. Such materials will not be saved, and the renting organization will be charged for the removal. Costs: 1, custodial costs are charged to the using organization. 2, fees for building use are established by the school committee on a regular basis. The rental charge for the use of the school facilities will be a fixed fee plus expenses for services listed below. All groups will be charged hourly for the custodial, auditorium, control booth, or cafeteria services if warranted. 3, costs for trash disposal may be charged to using organization if the event requires a dumpster pickup in addition to the regular scheduled pickup period. The building principal and athletic director, in conjunction with the director of facilities, shall have the responsibility for determining the amount of service necessary for any rental. The final cost for any rental will be determined by multiplying the flat rate per hour by the duration of the rental and adding the cost of service work as required. The time of the custodial services charge will necessarily include the time required to prepare the particular facility for the rental, the time that the facility is in use, and finally, the time required to restore the facility for school use following the rental. Community recreational public use of the facilities must be consistent with the use for which it was designed. The district will have the authority, with school committee approval, to post signage on campus indicating prohibited uses. Permits or requests for use of school facilities may not be granted where the proposed use or activity is prohibited or inconsistent with the use for which the space or facilities are designed. Voted Lunenburg School Committee October 20th, 1999. Reviewed Lunenburg School Committee November 7, 2001 and January 11, 2016. Revised and approved July 16, 2007 and April 27, 2016. Updated and approved May 3rd, 2017. Updated and approved October 17, 2018. Updated and approved May 1st, 2019. Updated and approved January 20th, 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Leighton. Before we open discussion on this policy, I will read the letter that we received from the Parks Commission. Good afternoon. Writing today on behalf of the Park Commission regarding the proposed policy changes to the facility use policy being put forward by your policy subcommittee. As I am sure you are all aware, Lunenburg High School is dependent on the facilities at Marshall Park that fall under the Park Commission for their JV and varsity baseball and softball program. An agreement had been reached between the superintendent and our previous recreation director, allowing for reciprocal usage, which allowed your programming to run at Marshall Park with no expectation of fees. The breach of that agreement by the school department during the summer of 2021 has led your committee to consider changes to this policy. During your last reading, the Park Commission expressed some concern over wording. It was sent back to Policy Subcommittee for revision. What is now in front of you has raised new concerns to the Park Commission, specifically the order of the priority of use for school fields. Those changes are concerning to the Park Commission, especially since niche groups that cater to a small number of residents would be receiving priority over town-related groups that serve the needs of the entire town. The Park and Recreation strives to serve the needs of the population of Lunenburg. Our programming serves all ages with a variety of programming. Part of the success of our programming relies on the use of facilities that we do not have open access to. Similarly, our schools rely on our parks for the success of your baseball and softball programs. There was discussion about this at our last Park Commission meeting held on December 2nd, 2021. I have been in contact with PAC to see when that video would be uploaded and would be happy to share a link when it is. The summary of that conversation is that we are looking for equal footing, that the town of Lunenburg's Recreation Department, under the town-related classification on your priority list that serves the entire population, is prioritized right under school-related activities in the same way the Park Commission has the school on its prioritization list. Karen Menard, Chair of the Park Commission. So with that, I would open to the committee any thoughts on this policy. Mr. Leighton?
Thanks. Thank you. So I currently serve on the policy subcommittee. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background too. And the superintendent can also weigh in as well. But this came up with the parks were planning to do an event where they were having an outside vendor, and the outside vendor was going to come in, make most of the money, but the parks was going to be putting on the event. So for the town citizens. With outside vendors, a lot of times these outside vendors are making the money. And if parks was to do these events with no cost, it's really just the outside vendor getting the money. So there was part of our policy, we had to change that so they could actually still put on these events, because we were going to be charging them because it wasn't their recreational activity. They weren't running the activity. And I think a lot of this too, as the town manager also said, it doesn't make sense for the rec department and the schools to be charging each other for what they plan to do, whether it's baseball, softball, rec leagues. So I get that, and I think that made sense in policy too, that this policy needs to be updated so that we don't have to go back and forth and charge each other for these activities. In regards to more of what Ms. Menard was saying in the order of the activities, I think the discussion, to sum up the discussion we had in policy, was that we had concerns over having the rec ahead of youth sports because they could potentially bump youth sports out of their seasons. Like we have oftentimes Saturday at the primary school is soccer days. If the rec department decided they wanted to do an activity and had priority, they could potentially be bumping soccer and other sports potentially too. My personal opinion, I think of schools as supporting students. And when we look at the high school and middle school, we have those sports. We have high school sports, we have middle school sports where we can support the students and get them involved in extracurricular activities. Turkey Hill and primary school, they don't have youth sports that are school sponsored. So they're going to have to go through town related sports where I look at the soccer programs, the baseball programs. So I think having that avenue, having them have that field is pretty important. Going back to the order, I think a lot of times, even with some things that we got from the rec department, it could have been a last minute, a couple weeks out, where I think a lot of these sports groups, youth organizations are planning well in advance. So I think it would be detrimental for them to get bumped when they've planned out their entire season. Another thing that came up too with our policy was that these are also paying customers too, that we're actually getting fees from these organizations, where if we were giving it over to the rec department, then again, there is no collection of fees to take care of the fields. And that was a concern as well in our committee.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the committee? Mr. Scolambrini.
Does the policy have an indemnification clause for people that are using the facility that are not part of the town?
I don't know how to answer that. I have no idea. Can you explain what you mean by that? I'm not familiar with that.
If an outside party were to use the field and somebody were to get injured, the policy has a provision that says they have to have insurance, but if the claim named the outside vendor and the school district as being liable, all the policy does is ensure that the vendor has insurance, but it doesn't hold harmless the school district. So like, for example, if there was like a outside soccer tournament that used the soccer fields and the vendor tore up the field, it might be the case that the school district could be held liable if somebody were to trip and fall in the field, and they have insurance, but that would only cover their part of the claim. It wouldn't cover our part of the claim. So if there was an indemnification requirement for outside vendors, then they assume all the liability. we have a requirement for them to be insured. And then if we had an indemnification clause, it would also require them to assume all the liability. So we'd be off the hook.
I can go back to the facility director and review all of the paperwork that goes along with the rental of the facility.
I don't know. I'm just like, you know, if this case came to me in my day job, that would be the first thing I would look for. Who is on the hook? And so I don't want to make it more complicated because it sounds like the parks just want to change the order of priority. But if we're opening the hood on the policy altogether to address the parks concern, maybe it's worth looking at who's on the hook.
No, I think that should be checked out, however we can check that out. I had my own thoughts on this. I think the problem, the part that was broken on this policy was that the kids didn't get the program they wanted to get last summer. And that due to misunderstanding or whatever, we ended up with the problem with the soccer program that the recreation department had procured for the kids. So we looked at that policy, and the purpose of doing that was that we didn't want the town to be paying the town. We didn't want the rec department to have to pay us money, and we didn't, because that's not what we wanted to happen. So after we rewrote this policy, we maintained that the rec department would not have to have paid anything for the soccer program to have been run last summer. That our custodians were already on property and that there was no other major cost. At the reading of the policy, this prioritization was discussed. It was not broken before. I'd rather see them put back on the same line. I happened to catch the the Parks Commission meeting where they were discussing this. And I don't think they have any intention of bumping the soccer on Saturdays. I really don't think that is the fact. And I don't think we tend to bump programs once they're booked, even if the priority is different. If you are priority 3 and you book something before priority, you book something after priority 4 already had it, I don't think we bump people. I did ask that question, and people don't get bumped. So for the youth soccer, to use the soccer example, for the youth soccer who knows when their season is, who probably applies for that season like in March for the playing in September, the recreation department is not going to bump them. I don't think this was broken. I don't think they need to be put above that. I think we should just put it back to where it was. That's my own thought, and I may be in the minority, but that is my thought. Another just quick thing on it is there was a typo in one section that we can fix. And the other was in the policy, it says that the town has priority for annual town meeting. It should probably say annual and special town meeting, because those are two different things. And as long as we have it open anyways, we might as well fix that. So, so that's just my thought on it. And the other clarification I wanted to make was when this is finished, because I know one of the other questions are, we said related costs or something that people could be responsible for related costs. And the example we used was if somebody created so very much trash that we had to call the dumpster in an extra time, then that would be related costs. Once this policy is settled, the intention is to meet with the Parks Commission and then go through a procedure so that everybody knows what's going on ahead of time. Everybody knows, who do you contact to sign up to use this field? How far ahead do you have to contact people? You know, what the procedure is, because that was part of the problem over the summer as well. They felt like they were getting bounced from person to person and they didn't get an answer, and it was kind of last minute and it just blew up. We just had a major problem with it. So I just wanted to state that we do know that there is another piece to this. Once the policy is set, we would have to meet with the Parks Commission and talk about what the procedure is. So those are just my thoughts. For what it's worth. Any other thoughts? Then we have to make a decision whether we accept this policy as written or does it go back to policy again? Mr. Leighton.
I think we got some good feedback tonight, and I think we should send this back to policy.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, then back to policy it goes. One more time. Thank you very much. I appreciate the work on this policy. Okay, so now we are at public comment, open to any item under the scope of authority of the school committee. Is there anyone that would like to make a public comment? Mr. Leighton?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up some MASC professional development opportunities.
Awesome.
So they do have upcoming a learning lunch series. It's a budget theme for FY23. It's on January 7th. It's a Friday. It's at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's an online location. The other ones are charting the course, which might be good for Tony. But the charting the course I saw was at February 5th. It's at Everett High School at 8:15 a.m. And there's another charting the course. It's a March online program, part 1 on March 12th, online at 8:30 a.m. I'm not able to attend the budget themes on January 7th. I have to work at noon on Friday, but I'll just throw it out there if anybody was interested.
I'll take a look at it. I can probably listen in.
Additionally, I'll just call your attention to the fact that under reports, we've added MASC workshop reports. So if there are opportunities upcoming, we can make sure we get it there. But based on your goals, if anybody has attended a workshop, they could also report out on it there.
Great. Mr. Rogers, I see you there. Did you want to make a comment?
Yes, I would like to, Madam Chairperson. As it pertains to the agenda on action on the FY23 budget, my suggestion would be somehow to indicate the impact that these new positions would have upon the 2.5 cap, because it's one thing to place these in, but it would just give everybody a benefit of knowing what the financial consequences are. The second comment I would like to make is relative to the school bus transportation recommendations. Mr. Cassidy indicated that the contract was ready to go, and I wondered if the contract includes language that would allow the town not to pay expenses if, because of no fault of their own, for instance, the state shut the schools down. I know that we had a issue in town with this before, and I just wondered if that was taken care of. And the last comment I have is the Mr. Cassidy, I think, mentioned in his discussion about the new facilities director. And if that's the case, I was unaware of it and wondered if my hearing is gone or if, in fact, there is going to be a new facilities director. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
You're welcome, Mr. Rogers. Our facilities director that took the place of Mr. Londa is John Murphy, and he has been working with us through the fall here. I know there's been some discussion at the town level on a facilities manager. I don't believe that is a position that's been filled yet, but that's not my deal. So that I can tell you. Thank you for your comments on the budget and the busing. When we look at the bus contract, that is something we will look at. Thank you. Continuing for reports, the athletic advisory.
We have not met.
All righty. Finance committee. The finance committee met on the 9th of December. There was a general discussion about the need for the finance committee to see how interdepartmental payments are made. There wasn't a resolution to that, but there was a discussion about it. There was a continued discussion about Chapter 70 funds, including the information Mr. Cassidy gave us at our last meeting. And some discussion was had regarding costs that maybe the legislators could help us with. And on that topic, though it wasn't at the FinCom meeting, tomorrow morning we are going to meet with, I will be meeting and Dr. Burnham with our legislators and Mr. Adams at the primary school to accept the big check for the $25,000 that was earmarked for the fire alarm system at the primary building. But there was a discussion at FinCom about ideas that perhaps they could give the legislators so that they would be able to help with costs in general. So, so that was what occurred at FinCom. Their next meetings are January 13th and the 20th.
Carol,
Yeah.
in regards to that, I wonder how much you could direct them to capital planning. Like capital planning has like all these projections out of all these different projects that definitely could use some additional funding.
Oh, that's
That
true
could be
enough.
one avenue for finance committee to explore.
Yeah. Thank you. PTO. And I think that's Sophie, and she's not here. School councils, the primary school.
Yep. So the primary school met on Monday. Some of the topics discussed was the PBIS, the positive behavioral interventions and supports. We also had a guest, Stephanie Miller, the school adjustment counselor there, new school adjustment counselor there. She talked about social emotional learning lessons, one-on-one meetings for extra support, a behavioral support team. So some good changes going on there and good supports there. The principal also talked about the winter iReady was not going to be this week, and that they were looking at January dates. The laminator that was ordered is on the way, expect it in January. And that the dashboard on the school dashboard, the numbers are up, but they're doing all right at the primary school, and they're thinking positive thoughts. Hopefully be all right.
All right, thank you. The Turkey Hill.
Turkey Hill was actually supposed to meet tomorrow, but our meeting was canceled, so we likely won't meet until the new year.
Thank you. And the middle school, I know that they haven't met. The meeting date is the first week of January, And I had told Mr. Santry that I would jump back on, but I believe Mr. Schoenbrini is already on there. So I would think there's no need for me to jump back on if we have a member already in attendance. So I thank
Happy
you
to
very
do
much
that.
for that.
Yep.
And the high school, Sophie isn't here, but I don't think they're meeting till after the new year. I could be wrong. Capital planning.
Yeah, so capital planning met on Tuesday, and we started organizing our priorities as a group. Really, at this point, where this past meeting, we clumped them into kind of 3 categories of like that top third, the middle third, and the bottom third. And our homework for next meeting for Tuesday is to each individual set a priority for those each item, and then meet back and try to be more specific with our next meeting.
All right, thank you. The wellness advisory. I think that's Sophie as well. Paxel. And that's probably, Laura, is that you?
You'd think after a year I'd figure out where my mute button was. No, we have not met. We're not meeting again till January. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. The Passios Building Design Committee.
So we also met again last night. It's been a while, time off, but the select board, we had a dual meeting with the select board, discussing the potential future of the TC Passios Building Design Committee, because the charge is not really the same anymore. So they're working on a new charge, and they hope to have that by next meeting. Looking at trying to broaden our charge a little bit, not just limited to the TCP building, maybe taking into consideration, say, the town hall, the Ritter building, so kind of open-ended. And also, there's also the concern of the high cost too, and are there going to be maybe potentially a redesign of the building and being a little bit more specific on the priorities and deciding what actually is going to be able to fit in the building. Maybe it's a smaller plan. So we'll see where that goes and see what we get. Stay tuned for the select board meeting next week.
Thank you. Lifelong learning. That has not met. The policy subcommittee, we discussed the policy tonight, but is there anything else you'd like to report?
We met on Monday and we're gonna meet next Monday.
Okay. MASC workshop report.
Yeah, that one
I
snuck up on me. I didn't see that one.
Yeah, I started to watch. There was a presentation on chapter 70 by Tracy Novak, and it was essentially the same presentation. And I got about a third of the way through and I got called away and I couldn't finish it. I assume it was the same information, but I will get back and watch it.
Yeah, so I wonder how many workshops they are going to post, because right now it's just one, but they do post the older ones. So over the past several months, they've hosted like a lot of virtual professional development workshops on key issues. So they posted those videos, those recordings. So even if people want to just watch, if you weren't able to attend any of the other ones, they have some good ones on school committee superintendent relations, there's parliamentary procedure, budgeting, the role of the chair, school finance. So there's a bunch of different topics on ones they've posted because they've recorded them. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities.
Thank you. Topics for future discussion. Yes.
We had talked about this a few meetings ago, but if we could start looking to open up bringing in Turkey Hill into our discussions, just because we know it's something that's going to need to be addressed, and maybe sooner rather than later, we should start discussing it.
Sounds good to me. It is going to have to be addressed. Okay, if
Carol,
there's nothing. Yes. go
Carol, yeah,
ahead.
I had thought with Tony coming in, maybe a reorganization might be good for next agenda. We can maybe look at giving
The
away some of
committees.
my subcommittees.
You don't want all those subcommittees? Brian is the subcommittee master here. Yeah, that would be fine. We could take a look and see how we can juggle things so that you don't have quite so much on your plate.
Mhm.
So if that would be it, then I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn. Yes,
Make a motion to adjourn at 9:50 PM.
I will second that.
all those in favor? Roll call?
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
Mr. Schoenbrini,
Yes.
and Mrs. Archibald.
Yes. Thank you very much. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Have a good evening, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for your support.